Great. Thank you so much for the lovely invite to talk to the active aging group with Unison at Kirby. Thanks, everyone. I am just thrilled, like you mentioned, Heather, to share information. I want people to live their best lives, and being able to hear. If we have hearing loss, that can be a barrier. So over the past 20 years of my professional career, I have done everything I can to educate people and share resources um, and technology to, help them live their best lives and hear as well as possible. Okay, so today's presentation is interesting. When we decided to do a series of 3 presentations, myself and Heather, and we started out with just general information about hearing loss that everyone should know and about hearing health. Then we talked a little bit more in detail about some myths and truths about hearing aids and technology. And now this one's actually my favorite because this is one that very few people have the opportunity to learn about, which is what to do if you have hearing aids, but it's not enough. What are some other options to support those living with hearing loss that go beyond hearing aids? Sorry, I'm not a great presenter all the time technologically. There we go. Okay, so we've got my first slide. So I'll just let you know that, like I mentioned, I started my my audiology clinics about 20 years ago now. It'll be our 20th anniversary next year. So I'm really excited about all of the lives that we've touched and yeah, some of the successes that we've had, challenges, but also mostly successes. And a lot of that comes down to the team members that work with us. So some of these people that you might have seen, Linda, Bryce, Alan, and these are clinicians who work with patients, but also we have a wonderful team of people who answer the phone or return emails or work at our front desks. And we all work together with the same goals in mind, which is to help you hear your very best and enjoy your life and live your life to the fullest. I will mention we're independently owned, so I'm actually the owner of these clinics. We've got 4 clinics in Calgary. We're opening another one in the fall, and we have a clinic in Red Deer. There we go. Oops. Sorry, everyone. Just a tiny delay here with my keyboard. Heather, maybe you can jump in and help me. I'm just having a little bit of trouble transferring between slides. So doing what I normally do. There we go. Okay, I think it works. There we go. I think we're good. Okay. So just a reminder to everyone, I know some people have been on the previous presentations. If you haven't, you can find them on YouTube through the Unison at Kirby Active Aging department. So I did want to give you a really brief synopsis of what happens with hearing loss to remind people who may not have attended that those seminars. So what's important to know is after age 60, nearly half of Canadians have difficulty hearing speech correctly because they have hearing loss. And the majority of them don't realize that this is why they feel like people are mumbling or like they can't hear clearly or like things aren't that distinct. So that's a really important reminder. If you feel that way, you should definitely get your hearing checked. And another reason that it's important to take care of your hearing if you do go to a hearing clinic and they find hearing loss has to do with the fact that if we have untreated hearing loss, it's the highest modifiable risk factor for dementia in groups of people over age 50. So that's very, very important. And I want to add one really interesting note, which is in 2020, so very recently, some researchers found that if we're walking around our daily lives, we have hearing loss, we don't do anything about it, and our ears aren't sending as much information to our brain, well, the visual part of our brain is very greedy. It steals some of those areas. And because of that, it makes it much harder to use our ears in noisy places. And we end up becoming much more reliant on our eyes. So if that's something that you're noticing, then it might be time for a hearing test as well. And then the latest and greatest research just from 2023 is that the early findings from a longitudinal study at the oh my goodness, John Hopkins Medical Center shows that hearing aids can reduce cognitive changes in an at-risk population of people over age 60. So what does at risk mean? It means people who had cardiovascular disease, people who live alone, people who have diabetes and other types of health issues. Okay, and here are the symptoms. So if you're thinking, well, that's me, I have cardiovascular disease or I live alone. So things to consider as symptoms of hearing loss, if you're, new to this area, or if you have quite a bit of hearing loss already and you wear hearing aids, a time to go and get those hearing aids investigated a little further, maybe have a recheck on your hearing, and maybe get some options for accessories or other things that can work for you that go beyond hearing aids, is if you are noticing these signs or symptoms on a frequent basis. So asking people to repeat, turning the TV or radio up louder than other people, having more difficulty hearing people if their back is turned, feeling like people often mumble or like they're not speaking clearly or like their speech is not distinct, ringing or buzzing in your ears, difficulty hearing people at a distance if you go to a presentation or to book club and someone's far from you and it's harder to hear even with your hearing aids. Well, maybe we need to investigate what's going on with your hearing aids and see if your hearing has changed, see if your hearing aids need some adjustments or updating, and see if there's some other things that can help beyond hearing aids. So those are the signs and symptoms to consider. And I really wanted to get the message across as to why hearing aids aren't the only solution when people have hearing loss. Okay, here is why. This is the very basics of it. Hearing aids are designed to increase soft sounds of very specific frequencies. So if you happen to have a hearing loss where you have difficulty hearing consonant sounds, it's a very common hearing loss, then the hearing aids are designed to constantly monitor what's going on, pick up those consonant sounds, and turn them up. However, they cannot tell which consonant sounds you're interested in hearing, whether you want to hear your friend Teresa or you want to hear your friend Natasha. So if they're talking at the same time, that becomes a job for your brain to figure out, okay, which voice do I need to listen to? Okay, so hearing aids can turn the sounds up that you need, yes, but your brain has to still work to figure out which sounds to focus and attend to. Okay, number two, they do not block out extraneous noise. And I like this picture because it's a good visual representation of what happens when you're in a really noisy place. Okay, so if you see the top picture, you can just barely make out the word. It says signal, and then there's a lot of blue dots in the background. Okay, so that would be indicative of us trying to read the word signal in background noise. If we look at the bottom picture, where the signal is much more clear, that would be a situation where maybe we're in a noisy restaurant, but the person's voice is pulled out of that background sound and is much easier for us to understand. Hearing aids can do that to a small degree. Our brain helps us do that for an additional degree, but some of the equipment and techniques that I'm going to talk to you about help do that much better. And it just so happens that when people have significant hearing loss, their brains lose the ability to do these kinds of important auditory tasks, such as filtering out background sounds and focusing on the signals that we want to hear. Okay, so that is why hearing aids are often only the first step in hearing care. And like I mentioned, especially when there are significant hearing challenges, so lots of hearing loss, or perhaps the kind of hearing loss where it's really hard for your brain to make sense of what you're hearing, to interpret words and speech and sounds. And unfortunately, some people just have that kind of hearing loss. And additionally, unfortunately, some people wait too long to get the help with their hearing, to the point where their brain starts to have that kind of difficulty with interpreting and understanding hearing. So this is a reason why it's so important to take your hearing evaluation results seriously and get on top of it and do something, because if we're not sending sound to your ears, nor are we sending stimulation to the brain. And the research shows the brain changes. And even if we got you the very most advanced hearing aids available, if you have waited too long, the brain will have difficulty understanding the sound that the hearing aids deliver to the ears. Okay, so what are some of these next steps, let's call them, after you get hearing aids? So things that we can do beyond hearing aids. And I should mention that a good clinic, so an audiology clinic like ours, is the kind of place where they should be talking to you about these types of devices, these types of techniques, okay? And in the hearing aid landscape, I will tell you there are a lot of, I would call them more retail hearing aid store type chains. That is not the kind of place where they're going to take the time to talk to you about communication strategies and have access to different types of devices. Their main focus is hearing aids, hearing aids, hearing aids, and that's not what we're talking about today. So at a clinic where it's audiology run, you're going to notice a different approach. It's a more personalized, more thorough approach where we do talk about communication tips, strategies, where we talk about assistive devices, and where we talk about things that are available, activities that can help train our brain to make the most of our auditory system and make the most efficient use of the hearing aids that we might already have. So here's one example. So over the years, I've been collecting communication tips based on science. These are not rocket science. These are based on important tidbits of science that once we share them with our patients, they say, okay, that makes sense. So we will give you things like these tips that can make a big difference. They're small changes in behavior that not only you, but your family members and friends can do that can help your brain make the best use of your hearing aids. Okay, so they're called communication tips, and they help with your listening skills, because we hear with our ears, but we make sense, we listen, we interpret, we understand with our brain. So number one and number two are actually not for the person who has hearing loss. And that's why I in the presentation title of today's presentation, I talked about how we can support people who have hearing loss, because it's not just the person who has hearing aids who needs to do something. It's also the people like us who are talking to them. So the number one tip and training piece that I share with my patients to let their families know, and by the way, we invite every patient to bring in their communication partner when they come, at least to their initial appointment, but to every appointment, really, truly, because we want to teach their communication partners, whether it's their spouse, their daughter, their best friend, we want to teach them some skills to help them communicate more effectively with the person with hearing loss. So here's number one tip. If you learn and take home nothing else, I would say teach your friends and family this. Ask them to get your attention before they start talking to you. Okay, so why is that? Well, first of all, you probably realize if you have hearing loss that a lot of times you might not realize the person talking to you is talking to you. And therefore, you might not jump onto starting to what they're trying to communicate to you until they're halfway through what they've already said. And then our brain has to, try to catch up. Well, that's very taxing, that's very hard, and that's not ideal. So the research shows if we can simply signal to the brain that, yes, I have to focus and attend to a certain person's voice, we're going to get the information much more quickly, be able to follow it better, and get the full message more accurately. Okay, so that's the number one tip we can do to help other people get their message to you so that you don't have to keep asking them to repeat. Now, what's interesting is by virtue of doing this, by asking them to get your attention, they will automatically normally orient or face you. So this covers off number two. So if we ask people to face us when they're speaking to us, this will help us so much. like I mentioned, the visual system is key to helping us understand what's going on around us. And if we have visual cues, then if we miss part of what's being said at the ears, the eyes can help us figure out some of the missing pieces. Okay, so those are two very important pieces of communication strategies that we share with our patients' communication partners. And these are the types of resources. I'll just show you. This is exactly what I have up on the screen. But these are the types of resources that we sit down with our patients at our clinics, and we go through them and we circle them and we highlight them and we say this might be appropriate for you. And that's the kind of hearing care that you need if you have difficulty and you already have hearing aids. Okay, so very, very important to get thorough, personalized care. Now, here's a couple other things that you can do if you have hearing loss. It's very important to be an active listener. So watching what people say, okay, so not just looking down, if you're at a restaurant, let's say, not just looking down at your food, but actually being an active, engaged listener, using your eyes to help your ears. One of the things that we like to describe, and it's on the next slide, but it's active listening. So let's actually look at that together. So active listening is when we watch what's being said. It allows our eyes to naturally help our ears. We'll pick up information from the person's body language, from their facial expressions. And one analogy I like to share to understand how to be an active listener is if you've ever seen people watching a tennis match on TV, you'll see their heads go back and forth watching the tennis ball. I want you to be like the person watching the tennis match, and I want you to think of the conversation, the dialogue, the speech of interest to be like the tennis ball. And I want you to watch that conversation actively. Okay? That will really help you capture more of what's being said. And you notice I use the word more. I don't expect that in a very challenging environment, you're going to capture everything that's been said. If you have a pretty significant hearing loss and there's a lot of noise around, and maybe you do have some difficulty understanding sounds, I don't expect that you're going to understand everything, but our goal is to help you understand more. And by helping you understand more, then it gives your brain the chance to help fill in some more of the blanks. The other thing I like to share is active listening involves leaning in and listening when you're engaged in the conversation and leaning out when you're not. And what you'll notice by doing this is that, let's say you are at a restaurant, you lean in, you listen to the person, and if you do that, the person that is speaking to you is much more likely to speak directly to you, to look at you, to speak more clearly, and to actually present you with a better, more clear message. Then if you lean out and maybe have a sip of your water, or just kind of relax for a bit, because we can't be completely engaged all the time in a situation like that. But when we lean out, then the person knows, okay, now there's a break in conversation, and before I talk to them, I need to get their attention again. And finally, active listening includes repeating what's been said to confirm the message if you're unsure of something. Okay, it's okay to say, I missed that last part. Please do, because that also lets people know that, you are having some challenges with your hearing, and they need to be a little bit more active and engaged in that communication interaction. Let's just go back to our communication tips for a few more minutes, because there are some great other tips that are important and based on science. So when you are in background noise, we can't always change that fact, okay? But we can sometimes manage the background noise. I'll give you an example. So let's say we're in a car and we're going out to the mountains with two friends to go hiking, and we're in the back seat and they've got the radio on. Well, to explain that listening scenario, okay, their voices are going forward, so we're not hearing them as well. We can't see their faces, but there's radio noise on covering up what they're saying. So perhaps it's important to say, you know what, I'm having a little bit of trouble hearing you from the back seat. Is it okay if we turn down the radio? So managing the background noise is very, very important. That will help you get more of what they're saying. Moving to a quieter location for a conversation. So Sometimes I go to seniors lodges, and we might be in like the open foyer area, and I'll be talking to a patient or a family member, and I'll suggest that we go to a more quiet corner where we're closer to each other and we can see each other and we're not disrupted by some other activities going on in that environment. Closed captioning. This is a fantastic free option that you can use for many different types of devices. But in this case, I'm referring to television. So if you like to watch television or movies, but you're having difficulty capturing all of the dialogue, even with your hearing aids, please figure out how to turn on the closed captioning, even for English television shows, okay? You can get like a friend or a family member to help you do that. Turn it on. And then when you're watching the show, I want you to listen first. So keep your ears active, but look at the closed captioning to give you the clues if you've missed something. And that will do two things. Number one, it might help you watch the program and get more enjoyment because you're getting more information from it. And number two, it will help keep your brain stimulated for the right sounds. And what do I mean by that? If you happen to be watching a television show, a lot of people tell me they like the show called Blue Bloods, but there's people speak quickly in the show and there's a lot of music in the background. So if you have the closed captioning on and you've missed what someone says, then your brain will hear the sound, see the word, and put that together. And the next time that you hear that actor say something, you'll be more likely to recognize it more quickly and more actively so you can keep up with the dialogue in the program, okay? Investigate some technology apps to assist you. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And be sure, don't be afraid to share your communication needs with people. You know, most of the time, people really, we're human. If we're communicating with you, it's because we have a message we want to share with you. So if you say, hey, Dr. Scarff, can we sit at a booth at this restaurant for our meeting because I might hear you better? Or when I go to a restaurant, because I have hearing loss myself, I will often tell the waiter or waitress, you know what, can I sit in a booth? And by the way, the noise in the restaurant is pretty loud. Is there any way that you guys can turn it down? Because I'm finding it really hard to hear you. So that kind of messaging actually goes a long way. So using these kinds of tips and communication strategies improves everyone's communication abilities because the world is full of noisy places and bad acoustics and places where someone is trying to talk to you from, you know, a distance with their back turned while they're leaning down, looking into their purse. So knowing these tips for people with hearing loss is critical, but it's also really important for everyone. And just to reiterate that we teach our patients and their family these bits of information because it's not just about the person who has hearing loss, it is also about the person sending the message to the person with hearing loss. Like communication is a two-way street. It's the person picking up the sounds, but it's also the person sending the sounds. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about some technology that can help you if you already have hearing aids and you're still really struggling. So microphones can help you. What do I mean by that? So I have a few to show you here. So these little microphones, there's different sizes and shapes and strengths. And basically what they do is wherever this microphone is, it's as if I have another ear. So let's say my husband wears this microphone in the car, and let's say I'm driving, okay? So he's wearing the microphone, I'm driving. Then when he talks, his voice comes into the microphone right into my hearing aids, and I don't have to look at him every time I want to try to understand what he's saying if he's giving me directions to where we're going. So any microphone system that we use, whether it's what's called a FM system or a remote microphone or whatever kind of system that hooks up with your microphone or with your hearing aids is functioning in a similar way. It's trying to pick up sound closer to the source, okay? So closer to my husband's voice or closer to a radio or closer to my kid's voice in the back seat of the car and send that voice right to my ears. So essentially it's almost like they are talking into my ear. That's the best way to think of it. Thinking of it like an extra ear. Microphones are great but they do generally have to be used in conjunction with hearing aids. And I will say, if you have significant hearing aids, that's hearing loss, generally speaking, hearing aids are probably going to be your first step. And if you're having those signs and symptoms that we were talking about at the beginning of this presentation, so if you're still asking people to repeat frequently, even with your hearing aids, then that's when we would want to look at some of these assistive equipment devices. Yeah, and I have to tell you, when these devices came out, they've been kind of in research for about 20 years. I've been following them, but they've become much more popular in the last 5 to 7 years. These are the hugest game changer in the entire industry of hearing loss and hearing aids, because of the fact that they can hold the signal, okay, wherever that signal is, they can get that signal directly to the ear. So they can improve the signal above the noise in a way that hearing aids can't, in a way that the brain can't. So they are a huge, huge game changer for people with significant hearing loss and people who have significant difficulty understanding what they hear, particularly in noise. And by the way, I'll tell you, a lot of hearing aid stores don't work with these kinds of FM systems. It is one of our areas of specialty. Okay, so here's just some examples of how this works. So you'll see there's a young girl in the one of the top pictures. So she's wearing the device around her neck. And then you'll see the girl she's talking to has the hearing aids on. So the young woman with the device around her neck, her voice is going right into that other woman's ears. So she's getting it nice and clearly. And you can imagine, even if you turn and you're not facing the person with the hearing aids is still getting that sound nice and clearly. There's table systems too. So you would put the microphone on a table if you were in a small group, like, maybe at a meeting or maybe at a restaurant or even at home if you're having the family over for dinner, and it picks up the voices and sends it to your ear. And then there's the other way to use it, which is pointing. So let's say we're at a cocktail party and we're standing up. We can use this microphone and just point it at the person talking. And we call that interview style. And it's very directional. So it picks up the person's voice that we point at better. So those are, again, microphone systems. They are often compatible with good quality hearing aids, and they should be available at good quality audiology clinics. Now, one other thing that can be very helpful is a TV device. So if you have significant hearing loss, even with hearing aids, if you've got the kind of hearing loss where it's difficult to interpret what's being said or understand what's being said for the reasons that we talked about before, then we can get a special device similar to what I showed you, and we can link it up with the TV so that the TV sound comes directly into our hearing aids. And that can do one of two things. It gives us a nice, clear, direct signal, which is great for the brain, but it also allows us to hear the TV without interrupting our family members. So we can be the only ones listening to the TV, and the TV can actually be muted for them. So that's a really nice option for people to, if they have a spouse or other family members at home. Here's some interesting options for technology that really came about, I would say, primarily during COVID. I started using them. So these are different kinds of apps that we can use with our phones. They're called talk to text apps. So if this is something of interest to you, you can simply look online, look on the App Store, look on Google, look to see if there's a free talk to text app. There's plenty of them available. You can download one, and all you have to do is simply turn on the app. And if your phone is connected to your hearing aids, which we can do with many of the most recent advanced type of hearing aids, then what we do is we just simply point the phone at the person talking. So during COVID, when there was a lot of plexiglass and masks being worn by people at stores, at grocery stores, I had a lot of trouble being able to understand what they were saying to me. So I would turn on my talk to text and I would point that at the grocery store clerk, and then what they said would come up in text on my phone. And that really helped me just make sure I was accurate about what was being said to me. There's advanced ways to do this too, and we've used it in our clinic at staff meetings where there's 3 of us on our staff who have hearing loss. So we've set it up so that if one staff member is talking, it goes to all the staff members' phones who have hearing loss. So these are things that can be set up, and these are things that we encourage our patients to try, and they give us feedback, and then we try them out too, because like I said, lots of us in our clinic have hearing loss, so we can give you some guidance on what works well, what's available. And many of these things are either free or very inexpensive, and they can just make a big difference in your life. And then the last one is training your brain to listen better in noise. As I mentioned, when we have significant hearing loss, and if we have a certain type of hearing loss, or if we've had hearing loss for a long period of time, it can be harder for our brain to get the message in noise. I should mention, this becomes harder starting at about age 35 in the general population, whether you have hearing loss or not. Our brain just changes at being able to handle more than one, multiple things at a time. But when we have hearing loss and it's significant, this becomes very noticeable. So there are some really neat online training programs. This one that I'm sharing with you today is free. I do it on occasion. It's called hearingsuccess.com. And basically what you want to do is determine what your goals are. So if your goal is to be able to listen more accurately in noise, then there's some little practice sessions you can do. If your goal is to follow people who speak quickly better, then there's different sessions you can do. You basically have to sign up for a free account. I've been signed up with them for years. They don't send any spam or anything like that. So they're trustworthy. They're owned by a company that owns a cochlear implant that's a cochlear implant manufacturer. So you sign up, you log in, you start off with an easy voice, and you'll see the person talking, and you practice with that. Then you can try different voices, different accents, for example, because when we have hearing loss, it's harder to follow different rhythms of speech or accents. Then you can add noise to the background, and you can add different types of noise. Maybe you have really a lot of difficulty in restaurants, so you want to add background talkers or restaurant noise. So if this is something that you want to do, I highly recommend you treat it like exercise, but it's exercise for your listening. And you do 30 minutes, a minimum of 2 times a week. Ideally, it would be 3 times a week. You just set it in your calendar, just like you do your cardiovascular exercise or your weight training exercise. So how you get access to this free program is, hearingsuccess.com. And then you want to go to the sound success portion, and that's where you'll see all of these different activities that you can look at and gain some practice with. And you can follow, what you've already done will be saved, and then you can make it harder and make it harder. And that's how you will get the improvement, is by making it more challenging over time. I will say, a really easy version of doing this is simply listening daily to podcasts, listening daily to radio programs where there's different people's voices, okay? And that is the key. It's hard for our brain to recognize differences in voices and different components of their voices as we have more challenging hearing loss. So listening practice is really, really key. So this is a good way to do kind of targeted practice, but in a day-to-day activity, I suggest everyone does listening at least 30 minutes, at least a few times a week, to a radio show, a podcast, or even to TV with the closed captioning on, but being that you are listening first and looking at the closed captioning second. Finally, if hearing aids are just not enough, even with some, adjunct devices like microphones, FM microphones, or listening training, or different apps, then you might be eligible for a cochlear implant assessment. This is offered through Alberta Health Services. It's like a 3 to 4 hour thorough assessment. It's only completed if you aren't getting benefit from a hearing aid. And we make referrals for those sometimes. I have about 5 patients who have had a cochlear implant on one ear because their ear has just gone down and down and down to the point where a hearing aid just can't get the right information to the brain. So very important to be aware of that. And just to reiterate that for all the patients on here, as well as for their friends and family, don't wait, okay? Whether it's the first time, whether hearing loss is new to you, or whether you have hearing loss, but you're really struggling with your hearing aids, don't wait, okay? Get treatment, get some additional support as soon as you can. If you are really feeling like you are hearing but not understanding, that is telling us something. That is telling us your brain is not getting all the important parts of speech. And it's causing too much effort, and that is linked with cognitive decline. So whether you're new to hearing aids, whether you don't have hearing aids, or whether you've had hearing aids for a long time but need to take it a step further, do not wait. Reasonable expectations with hearing aids is important. Most people do wait far too long. We know this is not good for the auditory system. It's changing. We know that it affects other parts of the brain. We also know that everyone's brain and auditory system is different. So your hearing test might look exactly the same as your neighbor's, but you might have a lot more difficulty in noisy places than they do. And so just understand, we really need to approach this in a personalized way. So you want to get good, thorough support from an audiology clinic and an audiologist run clinic. Yeah, so if you continue to experience challenges, even with hearing aids, I want you to consider these things we talked about, communication tips and getting some guidance through those, assistive technology and getting guidance on what the best microphone device might be, or training of the auditory system, doing a little bit of research online, maybe trying out that option that I mentioned to you. And in general, we definitely recommend hearing evaluations for everyone over age 60 or anyone who has 2 or more of those symptoms on a frequent basis, even if you already have hearing aids, okay? And one thing to mention, it does take time for your brain to adapt to the new sounds that your old hearing aids or your new hearing aids or your assistive devices or your microphones provide. But if you're still struggling after, I'd say, a good solid try of 6 months or so, we probably need to look at some additional things that go beyond hearing aids. So what are some tips for good auditory function over the lifespan? Stay on top of your testing, okay? Just because you have hearing aids and you've, had them for a long time, it's not set it and forget it. We need to check up with you at least every 2 years, check your hearing aids, make sure they're at the right prescription, make sure they're up to date. Hearing aid technology changes also. So, perhaps it's time. We had a patient yesterday. She's had her hearing aids for 6 years and, she's what we call underfit. So her hearing aids aren't giving her enough sound information. And that is equally important to address because it's kind of like she's back at the beginning where she was walking around where her brain is not getting the right information. So it was time to update her hearing aids with more powerful devices. If you do have hearing aids, wear them consistently. If you do have these devices, use them consistently, okay? Very important. They sound different to your brain, so you need to get practice from them. One great thing to do if you've got some of these devices already is just put them in front of the radio, listen to a radio show, or put them in front of your stereo, listen to some music. Do some listening practice daily to that point. Adaptation can take a long time. I mean, it usually starts after a few months, but it can take up to 18 months. Consistency is key. Practice is key. Just like immersing yourself in a language, immersing your ears and your brain in sound environments is important. So we don't want you sitting at home alone in a quiet room. We want you to be actively listening to television programs, movies, podcasts, radio shows, music. We need to get that stimulation to your brain for your brain to stay healthy. And if you have any concerns about you or your loved one's hearing, or if you're over 60, get a hearing evaluation, consider treatments if recommended. We need to keep that brain healthy. We also need to keep your hearing on track. If you have hearing aids and aren't doing so well with them, let's get you back on track. Let's discuss some other options. I always recommend choosing an independent hearing clinic. You're just going to get much more thorough audiologist-based, scientific-based professional care. Get the treatment earlier rather than later, because we know it's a use it or lose it proposition with the brain. Choose a trusted professional group who knows that that graph, that audiogram or graph of tones, is simply a starting point. It doesn't tell us much about how you do in the real world. And the real world is where we need to hear. So for that, you need to look to an up-to-date professional clinic that looks at more than just the audiogram, that looks at more than just hearing aids to help you. And just one closing note about us. So as Heather mentioned, our clinics, we have 4 of them throughout the city. They're called Audiology Innovations. I am a doctor of audiology. I am the owner and the operator. I train every single one of our staff members to work with our patients in a thorough, personalized way. We have many partners in the community that we help support. And the reason that they choose us to be their partners in the community is because we have a lot of expertise, resources, and education, and they know that they can trust us. We recently have won a number of awards for mentoring new people in the profession, as well as for sharing education nationally, as well as for being an excellent business that supports members, particularly seniors in the community. So that's us. You can certainly visit our website. We have Facebook and Instagram, and we have lots of really great educational information on our website. And if you're interested in this kind of information that I'm sharing today, please sign up for our e-newsletter. So you just have to go to the website and then you just click on the sign up for the newsletter. And I write that personally, and I send that out about once or twice a month. It's simply educational information. It's scientific based. It's fun facts about the ears and hearing. And we love to have people follow us and learn more, because we want you to have the best success with your hearing so you can go out and enjoy all the things that you love to do. And that is me.
Thank you, Dr. Scarff.
You're welcome.
That was good. A lot of handy tips in there that you can use with your family members and your friends. We're all getting up there. I do have a couple of questions.
Great.
So, questions around alerting systems. So like alarm clocks or doorbells or fire alarms. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. So there are a lot of different alerting devices, and technology has come a long way. I'll give you one small example. So for a lot of our patients who have pretty significant hearing loss, they can't hear their cell phone ring, for example. So you can set up the cell phone to flash. You can get a little device that you put on it so it flashes very brightly, as one small example. I had a patient who was quite young and is deaf on one ear, and he was very concerned about hearing his alarm clock. And so I recommended that he actually visit the Deaf and Hear Alberta, so it's DHA website, and actually you could go there, you can set up an appointment with their resource coordinator to go over different devices. And for him, the solution was simple. He traveled a lot for work. He was very concerned about sleeping on his good ear and not hearing the alarm from his bad ear. So he purchased a shake awake alarm clock that attached to his phone and just shook his pillow to wake him up. And I think it was about $30. So that was a big benefit to him, an assistive device there. But there are alerting devices too, and the Deaf and Hear Alberta have a number of great options. I would highly recommend you connect with them. So I was on their board of directors for over 10 years. They have excellent resources. They have courses on lip reading, which is another great way for people who have a lot of hearing loss to kind of optimize their visual speech reading skills. So that's a great place to start if you are looking for lip reading resources or equipment resources like alerting devices. Great question.
Excellent. Do you have one here about the benefits and limitations of sign language? Is it worthwhile to learn a few signs or something, to be able to communicate with your partner from across the room?
I love that. I mean, why not? Learning a language is great for the brain. Sign language is like any language. We have to relearn and make new connections with our neurons, and that's excellent for the brain. So they actually have beginner. It's called American Sign Language, or ASL for short, courses at Deaf and Hear Alberta also. So I would recommend that. That's a great idea for across the room to have a few signs. Yeah, what a wonderful suggestion. Thank you.
Any suggestions on how to get somebody's attention across the room besides throwing a pen?
Ah, great one. Maybe flashing the lights, turning the lights off and
Okay,
on. Yeah, yeah. So something visual is often a good help to our ears.
excellent. I got one last one here. Actually, two. Uh, educational settings. So if you're taking a class, we do a lot
Yep.
here at Unison. Um, strategies. If you're in person, like you said, it takes a lot of energy when you're
Mm-hmm.
listening for a long time. So strategies or suggestions around being able to get the most out of a class.
That's a yes, that's so couple great parts in that question is number one, it does take energy to listen. Okay. And so, especially as we grow older, we have less, and I'm talking like after age 50, we have less cortical resources to do all the things we need to do. So, going to a class, it can be quite fatiguing, especially if you have some hearing loss. Now, one very basic thing is the closer you are to the person speaking, the more, the more sound you're going to get. So it will be a little bit easier for you whether you have hearing loss or not. So distance is really important. For the and also because a lot of times at classes, they might have some visual supports. So you'll be closer to the visual supports. So that will help you too. So getting there early so you get a seat close to the front is important. Um, I'm just trying to think of other things that can help with the energy part. Like, I mean, if you've got some hearing loss, it's going to be pronounced in those kinds of environments. So taking care of your hearing loss first and foremost. If you already have hearing aids, then perhaps looking at an assistive device, a remote microphone or an FM system. So when I come and do presentations at Unison, at Kirby, for example, I'm often wearing at least one microphone for someone in the audience. And then my voice goes directly to their hearing aids. Um, yeah, so taking care of your hearing, sitting close, um, even mentioning to the presenter before the presentation, I have some hearing loss. Um, they're just we're human. We want you to hear us, so we're gonna probably visually look at you more. It's important for us to communicate what challenges we have, so that the other side of the communication partnership can try to do things to help too.
Excellent. So I got one last one. Communicating while skiing or swimming or climbing or, being out in an active environment. Any suggestions? Like I know you're mentioning the microphones. Do they have some sturdy, rugged ones? Is there some waterproof
Oh,
ones?
yes, absolutely. So I bike all the time. I ski. I do most hiking, like all the things you're talking about. And I have hearing loss myself, so I'll be wearing my hearing aids. And then I have at home a microphone. It's like this, but it's square. And my son will wear it when we go biking, and then I can hear him. And it's very rugged. It comes with either like a clip or around the neck loop. And that really helps me hear him. So the microphones are like they're actually designed to be dropped from repeatedly from like 10 feet high, I believe. So they're pretty rugged. Most of this technology today is quite water resistant and rugged. Now, there are even waterproof hearing aids. So I have a number of patients who have completely waterproof hearing aids. What does that mean? It means like I have a patient who is 17, she's a lifeguard, and she can't hear her walkie-talkie necessarily without her hearing aids. So we got her waterproof hearing aids, and now she can hear her walkie-talkie. And if she has to dive in the pool to resuscitate someone, they're not going to it's not going to wreck her hearing aid. So yes, technology has come a long way. We're at the forefront of all these kinds of options. And so that's why when we see someone, we sit down with you and we talk about, okay, what's your lifestyle? What are the things you love to do? Because we want it to work for you. And so for me, I love skiing. So I want my hearing aids to be comfortable even when I'm wearing a helmet. And so I've made some, small adjustments to how they sit in my ears. And, that really helps.